Future Sense is a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia at bayfm.org. Hosted by Nick Jeans and well-known international futurist Steve McDonald, Future Sense provides a fresh, deep analysis of global trends and emergent technologies. How can we identify the layers of growth, personally, socially, and globally? What are the signs missed, the truths being denied? Science, history, politics, psychology, ancient civilizations, alien contact, the new psychedelic revolution, cryptocurrency and other disruptive and distributed technologies, and much more. This is Future Sense. 10:11 here on Future Sense with Steve McDonald, Nick Jeans and Mitch Schultz this morning. And we have a winner for the Double Pass giveaway for the live theatre showing. It's actually Cinema of Live Theatre at the Byron Theatre on this coming Wednesday, 6 o'clock Double Pass. And the winner is Rose, subscriber number 4973. We have another giveaway short. Double pass to Sunday's film From Shock to Awe, which we'll be talking about in the next period of time as well.
Indeed, it's one of the things that is next, From Shock to Awe. And I guess we first connected around 2011, I think, when you were here in Australia for the Entheogenesis Australis outdoor symposium. It was that year, a great event. And then 2012, I was fortunate enough to travel around with you and Dennis McKenna and Graham Hancock on the Origins of Consciousness tour. And I guess that's really when we had a chance to get to know each other and sort of connect around the different things that we were doing. And then later that year, I think it was after the tour, you and Dennis and I were at Entheon Gaia up in Cairns, which was an outdoor psychedelic-themed festival, which ran for a few days. And it was then that I managed to grab you and Dennis McKenna and we'd sit down and actually just show you a quick, brief slideshow of Claire Graves' work and how it related to the consciousness shift. And that obviously had some impact, right?
That had a huge impact on me. I remember sitting down with you after getting pulled in a million different directions, and Steve, you kept coming back. Hey, I got to sit down and chat with you and Dennis. And sure enough, that happened, and it really just hit home within that moment. And I think since then, it's exploring these ideas about what's happening in the evolution of consciousness from the human perspective has changed a lot in how I'm looking at my own work and what I want to put out there. But I think it's playing a huge role in what's happening on the global scale. Yeah. And it's played a huge role in that. And I look forward to looking at those ideas more and more as we're going forward.
Yeah, and since then we've both been looking for, I guess, both funding on one part, which has been pretty important, and opportunities to somehow use Graves' work to put some media out there, which might help inform people about the consciousness shift. And of course now we've got this podcast and radio show going, which is doing quite well actually.
Yes.
And so one of the things that we're going to do while you're here is sit down and explore how we can take that further, and whether we can create a documentary or documentary series, or maybe even a fictional piece using Graves' work to help people understand about human nature and about change and why the world is the way it is at the moment and where it's heading.
Right, and because Graves passed before academically publishing his work, I think you know this better than anyone, Steve, but that information isn't really out there in the kind of collective consciousness that I think it should be, and being able to bring that to some attention would be wonderful, because I think there's a lot of meat in that.
Well, it seems, in my experience, having come in contact a bit later in the last 2 years with this work through Steve here, it's made a huge difference to me for sure. But one of the things that's clear at the moment is how many people, at least in this little bubble, in this region, that I know, that I meet, that I talk to, are more and more receptive to seeing things in this way, through not just through Graves' model, but at least looking at that and going, this actually represents something about how I actually am experiencing life now. And so it makes sense. And other people, of course, that's not true. They don't get it at this point, and that's okay. But there seems to be a growing consciousness of people sort of hungry for a way to actually make sense of what's actually happening.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Nick. And timing is very, very important. And we, Mitch and I spent a lot of time together in 2014 trying to figure out a way to get some money to put a piece together, that we could release using Graves's work, and really, it seems like the world wasn't ready for it back then.
Yep, I think you're right.
People we spoke to, weren't really receptive, and it's taken a whole lot of tension to arise globally, and a whole lot of people to get into this, point of not being confident about what the hell's going on and where we're headed, for there to be some energy around wanting to look for solutions and look for ways of making sense of what's going on.
And ironically, too, in Graves's model, of course, it shows how consciousness does evolve, and in a way, that's exactly the experience of how people can receive that particular work is an indication of how consciousness actually is evolving.
Yeah.
He describes exactly what's actually going on, which is fascinating.
Exactly. Yeah.
If there's one thing that humanity can agree on, it's that change happens. However, at the same time, it's the biggest thing we push back against, right?
So true. It's so true. We don't like change, most of us. Very true indeed. And the other thing on your radar is the possibility of making a sequel to the DMT documentary.
That's right. Yeah, my producer, after many years, has finally gotten through to me, and we're looking after. It'll probably be released. We'd like to. It's been a decade, and a lot has happened. Not just the amount of research that's popping up, but again, the global tension that you're talking about, and even a variety of different researchers from different backgrounds and different fields starting to get a new understanding of what consciousness and potentially what reality is when we're marrying relativity and the quantum world. And that all comes back to consciousness. And so we really want to look at that universal consciousness through the lens of the DMT.
And I guess the interesting for me too, as you speak, is the cultures that have arisen in this period of the last decade or so with this kind of work around the world, because there's all sorts of things that have mushroomed, so to speak, out of this space too, isn't it? So it's not just about say DMT or psilocybin, but it's also about the culture, the tribalism, perhaps at times, the research on one hand, and perhaps some of the mistakes that have been made also along the way, because it's not a completely clear space like anything, is it? It's quite a new space in a sense, even though psychedelics have been around for a long time. We're seeing a sort of, as we're saying, a second psychedelic revolution, but that also brings challenges too, doesn't it?
Yeah, and this goes beyond just psychedelics. I mean, people are talking about artificial intelligence, consciousness in general, and quantum computing, and how do all of these things connect? And that's really what we'd like to kind of explore, is how do all these things connect? Not saying I have the answers, but just going out and exploring and pulling some of these ideas a little bit. Like to just expand that idea a little bit and explore what is consciousness.
Yeah.
So going beyond the DMT experience itself to look at how it's interfacing with the world and I guess what it's doing in terms of being a catalyst for change. Yeah. And have you got any sense of format or who you might like to talk to, in the process of putting that together?
Yeah. So we'd probably bring back a collection of some of the people that we initially interviewed for DMT, the Spirit Molecule. I mean, obviously Dr. Strassman, I think Graham Hancock, Dennis McKenna, Douglas Rushkoff, Eric Davis. But then there's a whole slew of other new people out there that we'd like to bring on. Roger Penrose would be one. Pull down my whole list here and make this a little easier on myself.
And for those who haven't heard of Roger Penrose, he's a scientist who's done some amazing research, some of it together with Stuart Hameroff, who appeared in the What the Bleep movie, around the nature of consciousness and the quantum aspects of consciousness in particular. And some of their work is so leading edge, it really hasn't hit home yet with a lot of other scientists. And I'm thinking particularly of their work around the discovery of what they call microtubules, which are really tiny fluid-filled tubes which are networked right through the brain, and their initial understanding is that this is another communication system in the brain that really isn't on the radar yet, and it communicates through electromagnetic waves that pass through these fluid-filled microtubules. Yeah. So
this takes us from traditional physics into the quantum world, right?
It does, absolutely, and it also, it's another layer over the top of the electrical brain idea, which pretty much, it's probably fair to say everybody who's working on AI projects at the moment all all focused on the idea of creating a brain on a circuit board, and yet here we have a whole other communication system which exists in there, which is just not being understood yet. Yeah.
Texter has written in, "Hi Steve, Nick and Mitch. I think," and you guys probably know this guy, I think Leo Gura, do you know this man, from actualized.org would be a great person to collaborate with regarding a spiral dynamics project.
Oh, great.
His YouTube channel is excellent and a great insight on consciousness. Leo Gura, that's Gura. You guys know of this?
I don't know, but I'm just Googling here.
Actualized.org. Thanks for that. We will certainly research that. Very good.
Very interesting. So who else, Mitch?
Oh, let's see here. So Rupert Sheldrake, Jaron Lanier, you mentioned Stuart Hammerhoff.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to say her name wrong, but I'm going to try. Jimo Borjigan, who is at the University of Michigan. She's a neuroscientist looking specifically at DMT in the body.
Oh, that's cool. I haven't heard of her.
Just about to ask about where the women were, because there's a long list of men there.
and that is something that we were challenged with when the initial DMT film is like, we really made it a point to try to expand that. And at the time, and this is now changing, it was a lot of white men. And so that was something that Dr. Strassman and I made a very conscious effort to try to expand. And we did have some women in there.
Yes, you did.
But I think that, to your point, we're going to need to expand that here. Lisa Randall is another woman physicist that we're looking at talking to as well.
I guess that was shaped in part by the participants in Dr. Strassman's study, right? Were they mostly male? Is that?
No. So the participants had a pretty good range of male and female, but it was really about the researchers. The researchers and the people doing the science since the 60s, for the most part, have been white male. And that played a role. But that we did push for that, and I think that's changing a lot.
Yeah, that's good to see.
So. Yeah, and these are just a few names, but I think there's plenty more. So anybody has any suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. So please.
Well, we have a new friend here who's probably quite interesting, who has a PhD in anthropology after doing a year's research in an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. Correct? If you're listening out there, Dina,
it's true. Absolutely. Yeah. And you're looking at a similar kind of a documentary format for DMT too.
Yeah, we do a feature-length documentary. And again, what we'd look at here, we'd pull back Dr. Strassman's, his new paper that came out recently about how we can explore the DMT experience was through an intravenous injection, which would allow the person to go out and explore for potentially hours as opposed to minutes. The idea is to bring more back, be able to explore the space and bring more back and what is there. So we'd look kind of through that lens, but again, this wouldn't be focused strictly on the DMT experience or the DMT research. It would expand out to what is consciousness, universal consciousness.
Yeah, sweet.
You're resonating right now on Future Sense with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans. 10:29 here on Future Sense, and coming up at 11 o'clock, pregnancy, birth and beyond, as always. And thanks for your text. We'll just deal with this text before we move on. Thanks for this, one of our regular listeners. In discussion on DMT, are you also meaning 5-MeO DMT, which is the toad? For those of you who don't know, we'll explain that shortly. I had a wonderful experience using ayahuasca a few months ago, then did the toad. About 5 weeks later, the toad left me in absolute shock, and I still haven't recovered from it. I'd appreciate any input on that. Obviously, you'd like to remain anonymous. We won't mention your name, but you are a regular listener.
Yeah, that's a great contribution, and I think it's important when we do talk about psychedelics and psychedelic research and psychedelic use on the show that we also mention both sides of the story. And because it has been a kind of renaissance, it's been something that hasn't been built into society for the last hundreds or perhaps even thousands of years. We haven't had standard practices in Western countries, at least. There are, of course, some countries that have maintained these traditions over a long period of time, like in South America, for example. But for most of us who've grown up in kind of suburban Western society, we haven't grown up with any discipline around altered states. and the use of altered states in constructive ways. That, the best we've had is like recreational habits of drinking alcohol and those sorts of things usually, which really lack any kind of constructive structure, although they do play an important role. And Claire Graves wrote in his research notes that whenever people are going through significant change, the use of drugs will always increase, and there are good reasons for that, because the altered states that we get from psychoactive drugs provide access to perspectives that otherwise we wouldn't be able to discover, and it's often in those altered states that we see a new way of doing something, or we get insights about how to solve complex problems and those sorts of things. So this is why altered states have always played an important role in societies. It's just that over the last couple of thousand years, in particular in Western society, and this is also largely connected with the dominance of our mainstream religions, is the altered state work has been suppressed, and in many cases people have been persecuted if they engaged in altered state practices. So we've lost a lot of knowledge, we've lost the discipline, the structure around how to use altered states constructively, and they can be very, very useful and constructive. And one of the problems with that is that now, with this psychedelic renaissance that's going on, all of a sudden these things are spread through the underground very, very quickly. You don't have an established segment of society that has a professional background in doing this kind of thing. So it's literally anybody who turns up and feels like it, can grab hold of some of this stuff and start handing it out to other people, and that has been extremely problematic. I mean, it's also been extremely transformational for many, many people. It's an absolute mixed bag, and there are people out there that I know who are doing this work, and they're doing it very, very professionally and with very good results. But there are also people who really are in over their head. They don't understand what they're doing. They think they're doing good work, but in fact they're leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. And in fact, just this week, a couple of days ago, I got a message from a friend in Europe asking for my advice for a friend of his who had just done the toad medicine, which is from the alvarus toad, and it contains 5-MeO-DMT amongst other things, and it can be an extremely high impact experience, as our listener I'm sure knows from personal experience. And my friend texted me just a few days ago saying a good friend of his had just done a toad experience, hadn't slept for the last 5 days, which is actually pretty serious. Yes. And I texted back and said, is there any history of medical conditions there? And my friend texted back and said, he has bipolar, but has never had any trouble with ayahuasca or DMT, and of course my advice was to go see mainstream medical professional straight away, which they did, and I understand. I think he was treated okay, but this is the kind of thing that's happening, and because it's underground, it's often off the radar, it's not reported in the news. People hear about these substances through friends and on the informal grapevine, and don't necessarily go into the experiences fully understanding what to look for in terms of who's actually delivering the service, and what to be careful of. Yes. So it's quite a minefield.
Can I just ask a question with regard to Claire W. Graves' work here, in terms of people in different layers of that work and how they approach this work with psychedelics, because that's a big difference right there, isn't it? How people may do it, where they're actually coming from, what paradigm they're living from.
Yeah, absolutely, and it does change, and often these traditions have been carried through history by people who are living in life conditions conducive to layer 2 or layer 3 existence, which is layer 2, the traditional tribal, which of course applies to a lot of people in the Amazon basin, where ayahuasca has had long-term usage there, and also DMT snuffs and things. And then progressing from layer 2 to layer 3, where, and this is often where it can run off the rails, because you break away from the rules and they try and do their own thing. They discover, and it's not always unsuccessful. They look for better ways of doing things, but it also can be loose and wild.
Yeah, you can also, I guess, that with regards to layer 5, to the orange layer in Graves' work, you'd find, ayahuasca tourism, for example, which can go a little awry, according to many reports. as one example.
It can, particularly when the financial aspect is the driver rather than care for the actual people who are having the experience. But I won't mention any names on air, but I know of a particular operator who has a reputation of very, very mixed outcomes, and he comes from a country where the dominant set of life conditions is probably conducive to layer 3 existence. So it's a very power oriented, rough, raw kind of a country, and that carries over into the way that he does his work, and he's been known to literally physically kick people if he doesn't think that they're responding properly to the medicine experience. And that's just
extreme, but
that's the kind of thing that's happening out there.
Well, Dr. Strassman went through a lot when he was doing his initial research in the 90s, and taking this very scientific approach, which was necessary at the time. But then once pushing people off the edge, what kind of support do we have for them, after these experiences? And so it was some kind of very personal time to spend and say, am I doing this in a way that I think is going to be ultimately beneficial for these individuals, as opposed to just kind of testing their body mechanism and the biochemical aspect of it.
And again, he was restricted by the fact that we've suppressed this aspect of society within the Western world, and coming from a Western scientific mindset, there's no structure background around managing a DMT experience. Right. So it just becomes, okay, let's just follow the science and do it in a hospital, and even just doing it in a hospital is not necessarily conducive for a good experience, given the set and setting aspects, which are very influential.
For all of you out there, strangers in a strange land, you're grokking Future Sense here on Bay FM. Yeah, that's coming up this Sunday. We have a double pass to give away to that film at 2:30 p.m, following with a Q&A with Steve and Mitch right here in front of me today, and I'll also be a bit of an MC, I guess, on the day. So we have a personal interest here, but it's not a financial one. We're very interested in bringing this very important work, and Mitch here is the transmedia producer for this film, so we'll talk to him shortly about that. But just if you want to get in the draw for a double pass for this film for Sunday the 18th, coming up at 2:30 p.m, then give us a call, 66807 999, if you are a subscriber to Bay FM, and if you're not, you can do that straight away as well. Yeah, so the film is here, about to be premiered in Australia here in Byron Bay, which is pretty cool, on Sunday. Let's have a look at what this is about, because we've just been talking about some of the problems with the new psychedelic revolution, but on the other hand, there are applications done under proper research conditions and under the auspices of medical professionals and the like, where these substances are being used with great effect for the healing of PTSD and other kinds of trauma. Pretty amazing work going on there.
It is amazing work, and it's very close to my own personal story too, which is why I've taken a particular interest in this documentary, which follows essentially the experiences of 2 US war veterans, and their struggle with PTSD and depression when they come back and try and settle back into life in the US, and their lack of success with mainstream medicine, and the crazy amount of pharmaceutical drugs that they were given. There's one scene in the documentary where I think it's Matt opens up his medicine cabinet and he's got like 99 bottles of pills sitting on the shelf there, and he says quite openly, "These nearly killed me."
Yeah. Reminded me of my dad, actually, at that point, who was, as Steve knows, was a war veteran, Second World War, and when I grew up, he had this medicine cabinet full of those sort of pharmaceuticals, and that was the 60s, so God knows what was in that cabinet right then.
Yeah, very, very scary. But in my own case, I spent 15 years as a regular army officer here in Australia, and served in Somalia in 1993 on a humanitarian mission, which happened as a result of a huge famine that was going on there. And when I came back from that, I wasn't 100% well. I didn't understand what PTSD was, and I don't think the military really understood it either. I can remember during my training having a one-off lecture about battle shock, which is, strictly speaking, not really PTSD. It's something different. It's something that happens in the moment. And so I basically had no education about post-traumatic stress. In fact, I don't even think the term was used, when I was in my early years in the Army. And when I got back, I wasn't well, but I was well enough to keep working for many, many years. It was only 10 years later that I had a full-on breakdown. I went into a Veterans Hospital in Heidelberg in Melbourne for a while to get treated, and then went through the conventional treatment process involving pharmaceuticals and individual counselling and group counselling and all sorts of stuff, and really didn't fix me. I got, after 7 months of being unable to work, I got back to work part-time only, and continued working part-time for some years until I eventually had a second breakdown years later, and only then got acknowledgement from the Department of Veterans Affairs that I wasn't okay,
Right.
and then got some decent support. But it was a very problematic process, very difficult process of not being able to find a treatment that works. And extremely disruptive to my life, and of course this is the same story that's told in the documentary, with great impact. I think it's a really powerful piece of work. And Mitch, you had the benefit of meeting the filmmakers and some of the people involved in the movie.
Yeah. Luc Cote and Janine Segert, who are the filmmakers, contacted me, or put in touch through some other colleagues, and I also have some personal connection to war trauma through my grandfathers and from World War II, and in retrospect, looking back at how being around those guys, you could see it. I couldn't see it at the time, and back then we didn't talk about it. We didn't know what it was. We didn't talk about post-traumatic stress as post-traumatic stress. And that generation dealt with a lot of it, but now being back in war zones on a pretty regular basis, so many people are coming back traumatized, and they don't know how it's impacting their lives. They just know that they're not functioning. And it goes all the way through, not just to their work environments or school, but to the families. And which is one of the things I really appreciated that Janine and Luke looked at in the film, was the impact of the family as well, because
absolutely.
the trauma gets passed down, or sent through to the family.
Intergenerational, absolutely.
Right,
for
and
sure.
so that stuff, if we ever want to break these cycles, we need to start looking at other options, because it hasn't been working to date with what we've currently been doing and our current understanding. And I think there's some new science that's starting to come out looking at trauma actually being stored in our nervous system. It's not the story that we're telling ourselves, but that it's embedded into our autonomous nervous system.
It's fascinating. There's you're probably familiar with the work of somatic experiencing, SE work, which is Peter Levine, the American who wrote the original books, which is about, very simply put, about letting go of trauma in the moment, as an animal does. An animal gets a shock, and it'll might lie down, sort of numb for a while, might be frozen in whatever kind of shock it's had. It'll get up and it'll shake it out. It'll shake it out of its nervous system, and then it'll move on. Right. But humans, we just lock it in. We close it down. We shut it down. Vulnerability and feeling this stuff is not appropriate, especially for men, especially for people in battle zones and similar kind of things. Police, ambulance people, for example, sort of first responders, various types, all sort of suffer from these kind of traumas.
There's so much trauma out there. This isn't just war veterans, but first responders locally. In the States, and I think just around the world in general, so much of this trauma does not get actually worked out. And, through Levine's work and others, they've seen these 4 troughs, essentially, in our nervous system. There's that initial one where things are just a little excited, something's up, but you're not really sure. Then that next one being, okay, now I got to fight or flight. And then dripping down into what they call this third and kind of dissociation states, where people end up becoming suicidal and or just completely disconnecting from everything in society and in life, and it just become really numb. And how do we rework those states and rewire those states for something that's a little more open? And that's what they looked at in this film. And to your point, when they came back, I said, this is something that is tangible for people. It's real to people. Everybody had some sort of a connection with somebody that had trauma like this. And then how do we go back and help these people get back to a normal life, or some sort of a life where they feel like they can function?
Yeah. And after my own personal experience, which initially was with ayahuasca, which I found was very effective in clearing my depression, and seemed to work slowly on the PTSD, but for me it wasn't a particularly effective method of treatment. But then some years later I had an opportunity to do an MDMA session, and that was the most effective session that I'd done, of any type in terms of addressing the PTSD, and definitely had a lasting effect. But the challenge for me was, and this was stuff that I did some years ago now, was okay, how do you cross this bridge between the fact that these drugs are illegal, that they're portrayed by government and society in general as something that you should never go near. And here they are with this amazing potential to cure, some of the most serious diseases that we have. Not just PTSD, of course, but the researchers, discovering opportunities to deal with all sorts of ailments these days. So how do you cross that bridge? And it's been a very difficult one. And initially, I was very reluctant. In fact, I went for some years without speaking to other veterans about what I'd done, because I didn't want to prompt people to go and grab something off the street where they don't know who they're getting it from, they don't know what the quality is, and they could potentially die from it. I didn't want to be responsible for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was part of the reason why I went down the track of helping to create PRISM and try and get some legal progress there. Yeah.
And as we've talked about a number of times, MAPS, which sort of PRISM sort of arose out of the work of Rick Doblin that we've talked about at MAPS, has now seen such success that the MDMA for PTSD, as Steve's talking about in his own personal experience, is now at the stage 3 with the Federal Drug Administration in America, which is the last stage of research of proving before it becomes legal for this kind of research, and expected to be so by 2021, which is pretty amazing. And so this is a major change. And obviously this film, because I was thinking as we're talking too, this is probably the first film that really directly looks at this kind of success in such a professional way. It's a very good movie. It's very personal. It's very, That's
very what I really responded to as well, was the human story they had there, because that was the approach, was to, let's not make this fully scientific. Let's look at how these particular men and their families were impacted directly.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the timing is good now. Nick, you mentioned the situation in the US where they've got breakthrough therapy status now, not just for MDMA, but also for psilocybin and ketamine, S-ketamine as well, which are all alternative drugs for treating depression and PTSD. And we are years and years behind here in Australia. We're about to start a psilocybin study to treat near-death anxiety in terminally ill patients in Melbourne through PRISM, but we've got a lot of catching up to do. We've been trying since 2011 to get an MDMA for PTSD study happening here in Australia, and we knocked on doors for years and years and years and just got a no every time. No institution wanted to look at it because of the social stigma around these drugs, because of the fact that they're not legal, even though the research would be fully legal. Institutions like hospitals and universities didn't want to be associated with it for fear that it would tarnish their public image, and perhaps jeopardize their funding, which was the real reason that they didn't want to look at it. And we're still there in many cases. We've got an MDMA study in the pipeline in Perth, but we're still running into obstacles with the institutions, or one particular institution over there that we're trying to work through. And I think the time has come to really speak openly about this, and that's why I'm really keen to support the screening of this movie in Australia and get it out to mixed audiences, so mainstream people who wouldn't normally even think about these things can see, okay, here's some regular folks who've been really, really sick. They've tried these things and they actually worked. And we need to get across that bridge. We really do.
Well, the bogey in the room, of course, which I will say is the pharmaceutical companies, because instead of someone suffering from these kind of anxieties, these kind of traumas, having to take a pill a day or more than one pill or a whole brace of pills for the rest of their lives to suppress these effects, instead the potential for this kind of treatment through these new psychedelics can heal somebody in a handful of properly administered sessions, and that's an extraordinary change in the way we do health on this planet, and that's a big ask right now, but it's coming.
It's not about managing symptoms or suppressing the symptoms. It is about going in and directly addressing them and getting rid of the things that are driving the behaviors and the depression and everything else that's going on there. So it would be a huge change in the health.
I think so too, and I think that's one of the other things that has changed in recent years is more and more stories are coming out about the corruption in the pharmaceutical industry and about these big pharma companies who are very, very consciously in many situations wanting people to get addicted to their drugs. I mean, and I'm thinking of in particular the OxyContin scandal, the opioids,
opioid crisis generally, exactly.
You're tuned to Future Sense with Nick Jeans and Steve McDonald. Engage, emerge, activate, and spiral up.
11:54 here on Future Sense, and Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond is going to be a little late today, and there's a bit of a crisis. Maybe they're caught in traffic, so we might have to play a bit more music after 11, or just squeeze over into their slot until they turn up. We've been talking about From Shock to Awe, which is showing premiere screening in Australia at the Byron Theatre on Sunday the 18th, coming up 2:30pm with a Q&A with Steve and Mitch sitting here in the studio. And the film will be also shown for those who are interested and know people elsewhere in Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney and Adelaide. Those dates are on their various places. I actually don't have them in front of me, but you can find them very easily. Social media.
We'll post a link to the dates on Twitter and also Facebook, our Future Sense media accounts. And Mitch and I will be travelling around to all of those destinations too for the discussion panel in each of those places. And we're really hoping that we can get a good cross-section of society. It's often easy to attract the psychedelic crew, to in each of the places to this kind of movie, but we're hoping to get a cross-section and hopefully some veterans and maybe first responders from the emergency services and those sorts of things. Would be wonderful to have them in the audience.
Yeah, so folks, if this is appealing to you, if you are tuned to this, if you see the value in this, which I'm sure you can, you may know some of those very people in your family, in your close circle, some of those first responders who have to deal with trauma all the time or who may be living with trauma. I've just drawn out the winner for the double pass, and that is Ross Kendall, subscriber number 5587. Your name with it will be on the door for a double pass for Sunday at 2:30pm. Yeah, so how can we wrap up today? We haven't had a chance to go into a sort of a deep analysis of media, but that's okay, because I think most people in this area here are pretty suspicious of media and also pretty aware that media can do amazing things now, and that right. Transformational potential exists, and that we're seeking that. Many of us now, we're looking for that inspirational stuff. You go to Netflix now and there's all sorts of good stuff on there, there's all sorts of shit, but the things that really appeal are often those things that are talking about consciousness, that are talking about nature, that are talking about space and time and quantum physics and these kind of areas. This seems to be an area, particularly in this world here, I think that people are showing a lot more interest in and trying to sort of think, what is the nature of reality? Yeah, essentially.
The curation of media has been a big issue that's been on our radar, Mitch, hasn't it, for many years? And it was, I don't know how long ago that started to show up for you as being an issue, but it's got even bigger, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, just curation in general. I mean, looking at the Netflix, at Netflix specifically, they don't, with all their original shows that they put out, they don't do any marketing. But somebody recently that had this satirical piece decided, hey, I am going to get this thing up into the news feed or up into the recommended feed by just doing a Facebook and a social media campaign, and was extremely successful. Okay. So a project that probably wouldn't have been in the feed essentially has been hacked by one of the creators of the show to be able to push it up in there, because for the most part there's so many new shows coming out on Netflix and Amazon and every other platform that's popping up. How do you find this stuff? How do you find the stuff that's really going to resonate with you besides letting the algorithm tell you what you're going to be interested in? So we hope to keep getting our message out there, and we'd love it when we get support and people that resonate with our media. And
I mean, in terms of Netflix and all those platforms which are producing a lot of stuff or sourcing a lot of stuff from here and there, a lot of the shows, the current shows, aimed at younger audiences usually, I'm just thinking this, often a lot of the storylines are about superpowers, about unusual capacities, qualities, ESP, abilities to telekinesis, all sorts of things like that. And whenever I see those things shown, which are very popular on platforms like Netflix and Stranger Things, there's a whole bunch of shows like that, right? Sense8, I think you mentioned earlier today. Yeah. They're all sort of somehow related to this general area of we're more than we appear to be, I guess, to put it in one frame.
Yeah, and I see these as our hero's journey, modern day hero's journey that we are coming to, I'm sure, as you guys have discussed many times on this show, sensing the planet in completely different ways. And I think these kind of stories, these mythologies, are informing us and letting us know that, yes, you are sensing the planet differently. And it's part of our natural human process. But there seems to be quite a few of those shows out there. Yeah,
it does indeed.
In the context of the momentous leap which Graves wrote about, which is this massive leap in human consciousness, I mean, it kind of makes sense that as we approach that, people are dreaming about, imagining massive increases in human capacity, and albeit presented in Hollywood-flavoured ways.
I mean, for folks out there, I mean, is this your experience? We don't have time today. I mean, you can text in, we'll get it anyway, even if the show's finished, on 04373 41119. But if you're feeling this yourself, I'm really interested in this too, is how you're experiencing the other, how you're experiencing the greater capacities, the intimations of something else going on, your intuition, the sense of synchronicity in your life, of serendipity, of particular kinds of deepening connections with people, for example, how your networks are changing or evolving. Perhaps there's many sort of signals of these changes that are prevalent right now. Would seem.
Find the others.
Find the others. Find your tribe.
Exactly. And the more we talk about this stuff, the more it starts to come into the mainstream. And of course, we've seen that happen over the last decade or two, where we can talk about stuff openly now without being worried about it. Whereas maybe 10 years ago it would have been really, really weird.
Absolutely.
And it makes me wonder what we're going to be talking about in 10 years from now.
Well, we'll leave it there. Pregnancy, birth and beyond, they are not in there, so we're going to play some music for a while and just stay tuned. I think we'll probably let that go for today. It is 11 o'clock or just after 11 here. Thanks for joining us here on Future Sense. We'll be back, of course, next week on Monday morning from 9 to 11, and you can also listen to these podcasts, edited podcasts, via your usual podcast platform, but particularly you can go straight to our simple webpage, which is futuresense.it, and be directed directly to those podcasts, edited podcasts. You can also listen to the whole show on the Bay FM website, basically straight away at any time at bayfm.org. Just go to the program page of Future Sense, and our Twitter account is also at Future Sense Show, and we'll be posting there and also posting on our Facebook page some of the articles and things that we refer to in this show. Thanks very much to Mitch Schultz, the Texanel, for joining us.
Thanks,
I'm sure he'll be back in the next time. He's here in Australia for a while, as long as we can keep him here, as long as he's allowed to stay here, one of the two.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, and Steve McDonald. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Nick.
And we'll see you all there on Sunday, hopefully, at From Shock to Awe, 2:30 p.m. Sunday, the 18th, coming up.
You've been listening to Future Sense, a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, at bayfm.org. Future Sense is available on iTunes and SoundCloud. The future is here now. It's just not evenly distributed.